Edgar Allan, Chapter 8. It was nice having another boy in the family. It seemed to make a big difference to my father. We all played catch in the backyard, taught EA how to sit on a tricycle and be pushed around, played hide and seek, went swimming together at the beach in the early mornings. We were having a lot of fun. Father even began taking Stephen and EA on walks. I wondered for a while what he could talk to them about since they were so small, but when I tagged along a couple times, I found out. He told them stories. He made up stories about everything, about cars that would come by, or how certain flowers got its color, or about a dog that would run out and bark as the three of them passed. Once in a while, he told them simple stories from the Bible. My father just loved to tell stories, almost as much as he liked reading them to us. For he did. Father had a thing for about Winnie the Pooh. Sometimes, maybe even 3 times a week, Father would get Sally Ann and Stephen and EA and me all together in his study. We would sit on the floor, and with EA held in his lap, Father would read about Winnie out loud. No one loved Winnie as much as Father did. He could start out okay, all very serious and quiet, but he certainly couldn't get past the part about Winnie living in a forest under the name of Sanders. Father would get to this part, which is 2 pages in to the book, and start to chuckle to himself. Pretty soon he'd be laughing so hard he couldn't stop, and all the time he was holding EA and nearly squeezing the life out of him. This, of course, would make all of us laugh too. We never really got to finish even one book about Winnie and his friends, because Father had his favorite stories, and those were all we ever heard. Except one night, when I found King John's Christmas in another book. Father read this out loud too, in great English accent, and it became my favorite. But that was only once. Anne would have none of this. She busied herself doing a lot of dumb things that really weren't as very important, but that kept her apart from us and EA. Once in a while she would join a picnic or a trip to the beach, or one overnight camping trip as we took to the mountains. The thing about MN was, if her friends said it was raining and MN would be standing in the sunshine, she would have to agree, finally, that it was indeed raining. She wanted that much to be part of the crowd. Being MN wasn't enough. She had to be Snooty and Fats and everyone else, just so no one would know who she really was. Really, the minister's daughter. MN had this problem, and she couldn't solve it yet. The rest of us banded together that summer. It was the natural thing to do because funny things started to happen. After all, you couldn't keep Edgar Allan hidden away from the whole world. And while we had a hedge that runs almost the length of our front yard, you could see through even that in some places. The funny things were nothing you could get upset about really, but every once in a while a crazy kind of look from people in passing cars or a little extra room around our blankets at the beach. That sort of thing, I guess people were just startled by seeing the 5 of us playing with one of EA's and behaving as though we all belonged together. It was one thing to see Sally Ann and Stephen, who were just 2 little kids anywhere, playing with EA, who happened to be another little kid. But it was something else to watch EA run to a mother with skinned knees, or sand in his eyes, or just wanting a hug. Anyway, the weather was good and the days were long and filled with fun as summer ended. It was nearly time for school. MN started shopping for all the junk she said she would have to have. Sally Ann, who was going to kindergarten, couldn't stand the excitement. She had to know everything in advance, and you could tell it would drive her teachers nuts in a few weeks. Sally Ann really should be the teacher herself. I had passed into 6th grade without too much trouble, and during the summer had discovered I really was a pretty good swimmer. Good enough to make a kind of team that was formed at the beach. I met a lot of new guys there, and I would begin to have that feeling that maybe something I wouldn't have to worry about trying to be like everyone else. It's a funny thing. After I discovered English history, I found myself sort of surrounded by friends. It always feels when I lie on my bed and read about John and Richard III and Cromwell, the Cardinal, not the Puritan, and others, that really I'm more at home in the streets of ancient London and along its river than I am in our own town. I guess maybe because I rely on these people to keep me company when I'm low or when things don't seem to be going well. But when I got on the swimming team, I don't think more than maybe 2 people asked me about my family. Either everyone knew I was the minister's kid, or few cared. I meant to ask M.N. if she felt this was true in her life too, but I never got around to doing it. M.M. would probably have said something stupid or repeated something that I'd heard from Fatty or Snoots. She was like that. The thing was, M.N. was sort of confused that summer. Sometimes she would be quiet for days, and sometimes you couldn't shut her up. Sometimes she would be nice as could be, and other times she flew off the handle in seconds. Mother said this has to do with physical things, and I decided it was best just to forget about all that, and wait for M.N. out. I certainly didn't care why M.N. was agreeable when she was, and could ditch her when she wasn't. And since you never knew what kind of day M.N. was having until it was too late, I decided not to talk too much to her for a while. And so the summer was nearly over. Father didn't yet have to go to school every day. He spent most of his time talking to people around town about different projects, or working on his sermons, or reading or visiting people who belonged to our church. Sometimes, of course, people visited us. One Saturday morning, while Mother was out shopping, some ladies from the church group stopped by. I don't think they were expected or anything, but they were just walking and decided to sort of snoop around. The doorbell rang, and S.A. let them in, saying Mother wasn't home. Then she went to get Father, who was working in his study. He came out and offered the 4 ladies coffee and took them into the kitchen, which was big enough for people just standing around talking. I was finishing a book about Wars of the Roses in the living room, so I could sort of hear everything when things began to get interesting. What happened was that one of the ladies looked out into the backyard and saw E.A. playing with Stephen. "Oh," she said, "isn't that sweet?" What's that?" Father wanted to know. "Why, that little colored boy out there playing with the other child," the woman said. "He must belong to one of the servants in the neighborhood." "Not exactly," said Father, "unless of course you mean the servant of the church." One lady gasped. I don't know why. She must have known anyway. Then Father went on. "It's nothing to be alarmed about, ladies," he said. "The little white boy is our son Stephen, and the little colored boy, as you say, is Edgar Allan, a child we have taken in to start out properly." There were funny sighing sounds. I was a little confused, and I thought maybe Father was breaking it gently to them about E.A. being ours and everything. Is he an orphan then? Said the woman who spotted EA first. Yes, he is, Father answered. Oh, said the woman again, I think it's just wonderfully noble of both of you to devote yourself to bringing up this like this. How marvelous to take him in and give him the advantages of living here for a while before he sees how horrible the rest of the world is. Perhaps, Father said slowly, the world will change in time. Is that a possibility, isn't it? And then with the subject changed, I think, if I remember, it was Father who changed it. I stopped listening. I sort of felt uneasy, and that feeling that I mentioned before in my stomach woke up again and said, here I am still. And I didn't really know why. I guess maybe I just naturally nervous or something. Anyway, that was what our summer was like. Father and I went on our walks just like before, and he did most of the talking, as he had always done. We didn't talk much about EA. I guess Father expected all of us to treat him the same way we treated each other, which we did, except for MN, still, who had nothing to do with him. That was one of the things we never talked about on our walks, MN. Father was hoping that all by herself MN would change her mind about EA. I think Father hoped MN would change in what she did rather than ever say anything out loud about it. You could tell it was important for Father from just watching him watch all the time. Maybe he thought he would have done something wrong to wind up with a daughter who disagreed so with what he was doing. But although he once tried to talk to MN about it, and she just walked away from him, he never afterwards changed his way or the things he said to her, thinking, I suppose, that the best thing was to pretend all of this was the same before EA. Things weren't the same, of course. I knew that, and Mother did, and MN certainly did. It was sort of funny that Father alone insisted on thinking they were. I began to wonder why he didn't get my nervous stomach feeling once in a while, but I guess he never did. So, even though things weren't exactly the same, they were okay right up to the time school began and EA and Stephen went to nursery school. Then, suddenly, everything changed and kept on changing, and nothing had been the same since.